Welcome to Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear, where integrative oncology meets holistic healing. This podcast is your home for the latest in innovation, exploration, and elevation in all areas of integrative oncology, medicine, health, wellness, and beyond. Join me and a host of other innovators as we go from practicing to prescribing. Your daily dose of wellness begins now. Can ivermectin supercharge the cancer-killing effects of hyperthermia? Now, what I'm talking about here is actually a result of a study published in August of 2024 as a mouse model. The title was Ivermectin Synergizes with Modulated Electro-Hyperthermia and Improves its Anti-Cancer Effects in Triple-Negative Breast Cancer Mouse Model. Now, triple-negative breast cancer is a very aggressive form of breast cancer, representing only about 15% of all breast cancer types. Triple-negative breast cancer does not express estrogen receptor, ER negative. It does not express progesterone receptors, PR negative. And it does not express HER2 receptors, thus HER2 negative. And so in this mouse model, they looked at hyperthermia, but they combined it with ivermectin. Now, hyperthermia is a repurposed therapy, if you will. It's a therapy that's actually harnessing the power of the immune system, but trying to do so in a controlled manner. In the confines of hyperthermia, there's local hyperthermia, and that's really what they were using here. Regional hyperthermia, and then whole body hyperthermia. Local hyperthermia is much more of a directed tissue destructive effect, activating the immune system that way. When you look at regional, it's a combination of that plus immune activation, immunomodulation. And then whole body hyperthermia is much more of an immunomodulation effect. When you look across all hyperthermia research, the targeted benefit really is optimized at about 40 to 41 degrees Celsius, up to about 108 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hot, but very doable. Now, ivermectin is obviously a repurposed medication. Ivermectin is the flagship of repurposed medications here in integrative oncology. Compare that to vitamin C as a flagship of integrative medicine, but also a flagship of integrative oncology. See, when a patient's diagnosed with cancer, they lose control. Sitting on that other side of the desk, it's like, wow, what's my future hold? The emotions, the thoughts that go into that are hard to know unless you sit there. And repurposed medications give the ability of patients to actually regain some control. But the good news about repurposed medications here, particularly ivermectin, they can be good, effective therapies, but where they really shine is in combination with therapies. And sadly, because doctors have turned their back on the science, and they've turned their back on patients. Patients have been left to wander the wilderness on their own as it relates to repurposed medications, and ivermectin being that flagship. So you see it all over social media. You see it all over the internet. People making wild claims and talking about doses, but there's no really references to the research. And so this hot take is of a study talking about the combination in a very difficult to treat cancer type. Now, hyperthermia actually targets the tissue destruction here. But one of the problems of the tissue destruction of the tumor is that the tumor doesn't just wave the white flag. What happens is that tissue destruction can actually induce heat shock proteins. These heat shock proteins can actually then induce the ability of the cancer cell to survive. Particularly here, they looked at heat shock protein B1, also known as heat shock protein 27. And the elicitation of this, the production of this by the local hyperthermia alone actually increased the survival of the cancer cell by inhibiting apoptosis. It actually inhibited capsase enzyme production, which then led to programmed cell death through apoptosis. And so that's a problem. And it did so through the phosphorylation of these heat shock protein B1. Now, this study added ivermectin to look at the combination together. What's interesting about hyperthermia, going back to that context, two quotes from many who consider the father of Western medicine, Hippocrates. He said, "What medicine does not heal, the lance will. What the lance does not heal, fire will." Again, that fire is with reference to hyperthermia. Another quote attributed to him was, "Disease must be incurable if it cannot be cured by using heat." That word hyperthermia means to raise heat. It is really hyperthermia, a repurposed therapy in creating a controlled febrile response. Cultures have recognized the value of hyperthermia going back to 5000 BC. Ancient Egypt, actually the ancient Egyptian physician Imhotep talked about this, and it was discovered in a papyrus. The name of that papyrus is the Egyptian Edwin Smith Papyrus, and it was written, they estimate, about 1700 BC. And he described how raising the heat can be used as a treatment. Ancient Greeks used this. Native Americans wrote about this and did this as well. Now, this really came into the modern arena in the late 19th century with Dr. William Coley with Coley's toxin, which was the induction of a really high fever through 2 heat-killed bacteria. And the problem with this is it did create massive responses, a 47-year remission in one patient with sarcoma, but the febrile response here, the fever response in many cases was really terrible. And so what hyperthermia is the means to control that and put it in a therapy that is manageable, controllable. So what did they do in this study? Well, they combined, there were 4 arms to this study. There was the sham and vehicle arm. The vehicle is just delivery. Sham is a sham therapy. There's the sham plus the ivermectin arm. There's the electro-hyperthermia plus vehicle arm. And then the electro-hyperthermia plus ivermectin. So that's the big area there we want to focus on. The ivermectin dose here in these mice was in the mice 7.5 milligrams per kilogram. Now this has a human equivalent dose of 0.6 milligrams per kilogram. What you'll notice as you look through the literature, the higher you go up what's called the phylogenetic tree, from mice to rabbits to cats to dogs to monkeys to humans, is that there's a higher dose and equally higher safety profile. So the human equivalent dose is very important to know, because they're not giving a human equivalent dose here of 7.5 milligrams per kilogram. They're giving an actual human equivalent dose of 0.6 milligrams per kilogram in the 7.5 milligrams per kilogram dose for the mice. They actually applied this treatment on days 9, 11, 13, and 15 post-inoculation of the tumors. And they followed, the primary outcomes was following the tumor volume and the weight of the mice. Now, what they found was actually super exciting. The ivermectin combined with the hyperthermia significantly inhibited tumor growth. More, the mice tolerated well, didn't affect their weight. Now, why? Why is this important? Well, it showed the synergism, because when you look at the cause of cancer, there's no one cause of cancer. That's born out of Paul Ehrlich's failed magic bullet theory. But yet we still see that dominate today. Not just one cause. What's the cause of the cancer? Or what's the one treatment to treat the cancer? Cancer is a 5 billion piece puzzle. And we must understand that we have to stack and bring and combine therapies together in a very targeted way. Precision cancer care, right treatment for the right patient at the right time. And so where repurposed medications really shine, just as in this study, ivermectin shines in combination with other therapies. So what was the mechanism of action? Why did the ivermectin plus hyperthermia provide the greatest inhibition of tumor growth and thus tumor reduction? Well, again, back to that hyperthermia inducing the heat shock protein B1, also known as B27. And by the way, by inducing this, it induced the phosphorylation of this heat shock protein, did so within 24 hours. And this inhibited apoptosis, programmed cell death, and it did so by inhibiting capsaicin. But the addition of ivermectin, again, here of that human equivalent dose of 0.6 milligrams per kilogram, it actually inhibited the phosphorylation of the heat shock protein B1, thus inhibited its activity and thus allowed apoptosis to proceed. So the combination was synergistic, meaning not additive 1 plus 1 equals 2, but actually 1 plus 1 is potentially more than just the 2 together. Here, say 10 or even 100. And what's exciting is it didn't do so by changing the expression of the heat shock protein, but it was just through the activation of it induced by the hyperthermia. And again, this impact of ivermectin hyperthermia was most impactful and the most significant in the tissue damage of the tumor, promoting the highest level of apoptosis and induction and proliferation of the inhibition of the tumor growth. And again, it's tolerable, because if we don't have a therapy that's tolerable, it doesn't matter how effective it is. So what's the take home of this? Well, the take home of this is ivermectin has been described in the literature as the wonder drug that became a wonder dog for veterinarian use, approved in 1981, became a wonder dud, according to the late night show hosts that are supposedly comedic on Saturdays. They called it a horse dewormer, but little did they know that it was actually approved for human use in 1987. They probably should have checked with their writers before they wrote those non-fun jokes. But then it became a wonder drug as a repurposed therapy, as we start to see the off-label potential use of ivermectin. But ivermectin in combination with the hyperthermia, what it provides is what the intended effect of hyperthermia is, or what the intended effect of any combination therapy or goal for any treatment in cancer is effective outcomes. Safe, tolerable, and effective. We know ivermectin's safe when dosed appropriately because we have so many safety profile studies, toxicokinetic profile studies that show how safe it is when dosed appropriately. But more so, we have the understanding of how ivermectin can be used to target cancer. And here, by combining it with hyperthermia, we have the ability to destroy the cancer tissue directly. Now, the question is, does that then transfer to regional or to whole body hyperthermia? But here, in a more local hyperthermia, that tissue destruction of the tumor that can elicit a response that can actually favor and protect the cancer, ivermectin helps to completely counter that. And the stacking together, the combination of the two together, is exponentially, that is synergistic, better than each one alone. So the repurposed medication ivermectin is a powerful wonder drug that turned to a wonder dog, to wonder dud, and now wonder drug, but not as a standalone. Okay, I think that's important when we talk about repurposed medications. The power is when we bring these therapies together. That is going to be the answer to cancer. The best answer to cancer is to never get it. Beyond that, the best answer to cancer is the immune system. Beyond that, the best answer to cancer is stacking therapies together in an innovative way to overcome this crisis of lack of innovation in healthcare, but stack these therapies together to achieve a safe, effective therapy. And repurposed medications are at the pinnacle of that innovation. The great news is we have a lot of safety profiles, and ivermectin is the flagship of that pinnacle of repurposed medication. So I encourage you to check out the notes of this hot take below, because there you'll find the references supporting this, including that 2024 article referencing this microhyperthermia plus ivermectin. More tools available to you to achieve control in your cancer care. So please bring this to the attention of others that can benefit from this, including your doctors, whether that be integrative, natural, or conventional. I'm Dr. Nathan Goodyear, and I'll see you on the next Hot Take.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Prescribe Podcast. All references supporting this episode can be found on the prescribe.com website. That's pre-scribe.com. To get your next dose of medical innovation, make sure you subscribe to Prescribe. We'll see you for your next refill.